host a radio show, and I create media trying to teach Torah to the world. That's really the ultimate goal. The Torah shall go forth from Zion and the word of God from Jerusalem. That's in Isaiah chapter 2. And we sort of said, well, how's that ever going to happen? Well, we have the internet now, satellites, telecommunication, and if we actually get our act together, we could just start teaching Torah from Israel to the world. But like every Israeli, after I finished high school, I was enrolled into infantry in the Southern Command. And I'm 34 now. I got 4 kids. And it was 2.5 weeks ago. And we're sitting on our couch. 4 kids were in bed, and my wife and I were talking about how our day was and what the day tomorrow was going to look like. And I got a phone call. It said, Jeremy Gimpel? I said, yes. It says, you're a platoon sergeant in the Southern Command. You have 3 hours to arrive at the pickup spot. We're going to war in Gaza. And, I hung up the phone, looked at my wife, and I gave her a hug and a kiss, packed up my bags as quickly as I could, and within 7 hours, we were already on uniform, guns in hand, and training for our first mission. Now, that happened to 60,000 Israelis. Now, we're reservists, so we all have kids, we all have wives, most of us, business owners, lawyers, doctors, plumbers. Everything stops. You may have deadlines and clients and shipments might be coming in that you need to bring to your shop and sell. War. Everything stops. And something marvelous happened to Israel. Because on one hand, that's traumatic for any society. Because we're still a small country, 60,000 of us, that's a lot. But most of us, at least me, I'm mostly, I deal with my mortgage and my kids and my bills, and I'm sort of involved in my own life. All of a sudden, my individual life was no longer. And all of my actions and all of my thoughts became a part of the nation of Israel. I left my individual, my ego, my personal, and became a manifestation of the national. Now, why that's so interesting is that hasn't happened to the Jewish people in 2,000 years. In Austin, if there's a pro-Israel rally, if 300 Jews come, that would be a marvelous achievement for the Jewish community. And that's how it was for 2,000 years. A few Jews in Dallas, a few Jews in Austin, some in Poland, some in Germany. Now, for the first time, Israel was under attack. Now there's hundreds of thousands of us together. And the Jews have now come together with God's blessing. Things in Israel are happening that the world has never seen before. We can intercept missiles in midair in 30 seconds with laser technology. It's like, where did that come from? What are we, in Star Wars? And I've seen the Iron Dome work multiple times. There were times where rockets were falling all around us. Eventually it was just like, well, it's raining rockets today because they're just falling all around us. And what people don't recognize is there are thousands of rockets falling on Israel. No one is being killed. There was one rocket shot on Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago, 200 people died. There are thousands of rockets being shot on Israel, and no one is dying. It's manifest miracles that the world hasn't seen yet. It's hard for us to really imagine thousands of rockets launched on Austin. People would die because there are thousands of rockets being launched on the civilian populations. And the stories. The kindergarten teacher was sick that morning, and the rocket hit, and 50 children would have been killed. But there was no kindergarten that morning because the teacher was sick. This man just left his living room as the rocket came in. I mean, hundreds of stories of manifest miracles. They asked the head of the Hamas. And they said, well, how do you explain it? Thousands of rockets you're shooting onto Israel. How are you not hitting? And they said, listen, over the last few years, we have developed more sophisticated technology. Our rockets are larger. They're more explosive now. The only thing that's happening is the God of the Jews is moving our missiles. Hallelujah. It's so interesting to hear it from their perspective. Their God is moving our missiles. Now, I'm torn in two spots because I'm getting all of these emails now from all these different organizations, and I know that they're all real and they're all true. But I'm not here to ask for anything. But I want you all to know that those of you that are praying for Israel now, it's the only way to explain what's happening. There are thousands of rockets being shot onto Israel, and there is prayer that is shifting the reality as we know it, and Israel is being protected. Now, it's not being really reported about in the media. There were times where, well, I'll tell you the story how I got released from the army. It was, I believe it was a Tuesday night, and we were sent out on an ambush because we had intelligence that the Hamas were digging tunnels underneath the wall, and were going to just appear in the middle of the desert, and then be about 50 to 100 meters away from Jewish communities. We knew that it was going to be about 15 to 20 of them were going to come out at the same time. And 15 to 20 terrorists with rocket launchers, submachine guns, you know, all of them with suicide vests. They go into a community of 100 families. They could wreak havoc in devastating ways. And so all of us were stationed as the buffer between Gaza and those communities. So we were dropped off at nighttime, and it was about a 4-kilometer trek because it has to be covert. You can't just drop us off with a Jeep because then they would see where we were. So of course we have to walk, you know, camouflaged and through the riverbed so they can't be seen. And then to position ourselves that when they do come out of the tunnels, they will hit us first, and we would be able to eliminate them before they reach the civilians. And we're walking along the riverbed, and it's sand dunes. So the earth there sometimes looks like earth, but it may just become sand underneath your feet. And as I'm walking along the ledge of this riverbed inside, my left leg collapses below me, and the earth falls into the riverbed, and about 100, 120 pounds of weight, which had my food, my water, my ammunition, all of my equipment, came crushing down on my right leg. And so my left leg went down, and my right knee came up, and everything just smashed into one. And so there were 2 challenges then. One, don't yell, because you know you can't expose the group. So like, and so then I looked down at my knee, and my knee looked like it was a basketball. And I was like, well, we're 2 kilometers into the mission. You know, I'm a platoon sergeant. I have soldiers under me here. We can't just turn around now. Because if I was injured like that in a basketball game, well, I would have just taken a break. But we had 2 more kilometers to reach our position. So now for 2 kilometers, somehow, with all of my equipment, and I didn't want to scare the soldiers around me that I wasn't at 100%, so we just kept on walking. That night, 15 Hamas terrorists indeed came out of the tunnels. I don't know if any of you have seen the movies, but they came out and looked, we had aerial drones that were filming it. It looked like gophers. They just came out of the ground out of nowhere. And they all huddled together to make their plan to go into the community. And the IDF was launched into action, and the IDF just blew them out of the water. That happened about, I don't know, minutes north of me. And so we didn't know exactly where they were going to come out, but we knew they were going to come out in one of those days. And so we were now walking back, and we were right alongside the border. And to make matters worse, I had a little bit of food poisoning. And you know, the army isn't equipped to just accept 60,000 soldiers overnight. How do you feed 60,000 people? So they have what's called manot krav. It's battle food. That's the only way that it's on. And it's pretty much boxes with canned food. So for the last 2.5 weeks, I've been eating tuna fish and beans, because that's all there was. After 3 days of eating just tuna fish and beans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you start to become a tuna fish with beans coming, and you can't do it anymore, but you're so hungry. So you just, well, that's all there is to eat, so just some more beans and more tuna fish. But something went wrong, and I got, you know, nauseous. And so when you get nauseous, you get a little bit sick, and we're trekking back from the end of our mission. The next morning passed, and you know, I started getting sick, so I walked to the side away from my group, and I get sick to the side. My stomach is, you know, kind of coming out of my mouth, and I lift my head up, and I'm sort of still dizzy. My knee is hurting. I'm now dizzy. My stomach is nauseous, and then fire all around us. We're come under fire. At that point, my reaction was to laugh. I was just like, okay, I guess this is what's happening now. So I'm hobbling over, trying to find cover. I was never at one point scared, because I had seen that there was just